Good morning or good night or whatever time it is of day that you are tuning in here. This is, according to Sarah, episode 16. I want to talk about something that's super controversial, and I really hope that anyone who's listening to me can join with an open mind because I don't want to argue about germ theory and terrain theory. I believe in a blend of those, otherwise, I wouldn't use caution when I enter the public. But since I was a young kid, since I was about, well, I think I got interested in biology pretty young, but I wanted to say I was probably about 14 when I started to really get interested in it. And I had a dad who was into anatomy and physiology and biology, so nope, I didn't learn as much as I should have learned from him, but I definitely got the love of just kind of learning about that type of stuff, plants and animals. I think I definitely passed it down socially and probably in some other way. Anyway, that does not matter. That's a subject probably that I'm not going to go into. But I certainly had a lot of interest in it. And when I was a kid, I remember first seeing cork cells. My dad showed me. He had slides prepared, so no, he didn't like cut cork and do whatever it is you do with cork, but to make a slide. And I was just fascinated because, it's amazing to see a cork cell. So if you haven't done so, I invite you to go look at a cork cell under the microscope. You need to ask somebody that has a microscope to show you. Anyway, okay. When I learned about viruses, I'll give you the gist. I'm not gonna go get out a biology book and I'm not a biologist. When I learned about viruses, I learned that effectively viruses were little tiny pieces of information. And that when they themselves were not part of what my teacher called, because I actually paid attention in biology, R3 game. R3 stood for reproduction, respiration, response, and game stood for growth, assimilation, movement, and excretion. Those were the qualities that a living organism had that made it alive. Where viruses were lacking is that viruses could not reproduce on their own. Minimally, you were having that. I'm not going to get into the rest of the Arthur game thing. Like, it's amazing I even remember that information. So it's a little memory trick, But basically, we learn that the virus goes into the cell, takes over, and like a copy machine, makes the body make copies of it instead of the cell. I believe this process does lead to cell death, and I am not even, well, I am actually going to say it. I want to say when I talk about cellular death, I want to call it apoptosis. But I could be wrong, and if I am, please forgive me because it's pretty amazing that I could say apoptosis, right? Sarah laughed, so it's true. It's kind of like I can say that desafortunadamente.
The
Spanish
death of
word.
cells, which occurs as a normal and controlled part of an organism's growth or development.
So I
also
believe
called programmed cell death.
I believe when a virus goes in, and you'd have to look this up, Sarah, that it causes cell death because the virus takes over the cell, makes not a dozen copies. It supposedly makes more according to germ theory. Which, if you look into it, you're really going to find that about, you're going to find Louis Pasteur. Or is it Louis Pasteur? I always call him Louis. It feels like I know him personally. But Louis Pasteur did a lot of experiments. I gave a speech on Louis Pasteur and a number of other scientists in the 10th grade. It was a 10-page report. I very firmly believed that viruses would go into the body replicate through use of the cell. I looked at all of his experiments. They were just mind-blowing to me as a kid. So I couldn't wait to get up and talk to people about it. I had a huge report. I only got halfway through that before I threw my report down on the first person thing and said, I'm not going to sit here and talk to you while you're not listening. I was 15. My teacher gave me an A on the spot. He understood. But I never thought that I would. Did you have something to say? Apoptosis happens. So, you have to admit that I was paying attention in class. Must have been. Because I'm not very good at biology anymore. So, I only have what I take in when I read and when I'm able to not have cognitive delay. So, but I've gotten quite a bit, right? So, lately, particularly since 2020, since COVID-19 has entered the scene, I've been hearing a lot more about terrain. Now, terrain is something I've been talking about for many, many years anyway with my providers because they're trying to remind me, if you control the terrain, if you make the terrain correct, then life can be almost like a symbiosis. So the example I always give and was given was lichen on a tree. If you don't know what lichen looks on a tree, please type in lichen on a tree and take a peek. Maybe I'll have that be the picture for this. Sarah's always asking me. So the thing is about it is when they talk to me about it, I feel like there's been kind of an attitude. It's like Sarah's nodding. So it's true.
It definitely has.
And don't get me wrong, I actually kind of get the attitude. It's like, so you got one side going, oh, come on. It's so obviously germs, right? I explained it to you, Louis Pasteur. He's not the only one, but he did a lot of experiments. He had this like beaker. It had Sarah can look it up. I bet you I'm right. He had a beaker and then it had some kind of S-curve in it. In this way, he tested. After he heated the water, I think, or heated whatever it was, then the bacteria, I think, or whatever microorganisms got stuck in the S-curve. You can tell. I can almost see it in my head. I was really into it. If I'm wrong about the S-curve, please go ahead and correct me. I'm fine with it. But this attitude that it is for certain known is somewhat, shall I say, frustrating to me now. I was listening to somebody today. I don't know her very well, but I'm thinking about joining her program. She does a program. She's, I think, had some health struggles. I don't really know her very well. Mary Rudick. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Anyway, she's she has a health program. And she was saying that germ theory really hasn't been fully proved. And I was like, what? Now, I know if a certain friend of mine is listening right now, and he knows who he is, he will be saying, but I told you this, Cheryl. I know, but when people tell me about germ theory not being proved, they're so, they're so intense, huh? Or the opposite. It's like, it is for sure a virus gets into your body, and if you wear this mask, it will protect you from everything. Tonight I asked my mom a question. I hate to call people out in my family. I shouldn't have probably done that, but I'm going to. I don't think she'd mind. I asked her whether she would walk through a ward of people who had the plague with a mask on. Her answer? Let's see if my daughter heard it. Would mom walk through a place with a lot of sick people that had the plague? My mom's answer was...
She said yes at first, and then she heard you correctly. And
I had to tell her. I had to tell her.
Retell her.
Yes, so she said she was okay with it. She would be okay with doing it. And I think what she meant was, if I were going to walk through there, it'd be okay if someone asked me to wear a mask. My mom's become so accustomed. to this question that she was like, yeah, I'll wear it. Just so you know, my mom's not excessive with the masks. I think my daughter will agree. When we came in tonight to her community living place, she said, you don't need to wear a mask, do you? And I said, well, I've been pretty sick. For what it's worth, it probably wasn't going to do much more than the ventilation that I got the door open in there. That's what I told her. But my mom's not a mask person. She was at first, the first little bit. Even then, she was like, do I need to wear a mask into this small, teeny tiny place with several people going in and out of it? Yes, Mom. It's probably, at that point, I think at that point I was kind of a little bit more relaxed about things. And I was like, I don't know. If you want to wear it, go ahead. If you don't. I think I told my sister I'd probably put it on. Then I think I kind of backtracked and I was like, I don't know. Maria put it on. I believe so, if I remember right. And my family's pretty, they have done it. But at this point, my mom went to the store with me tonight and she didn't use a mask. So my question is, would you want to walk through a place with 100 people that had the plague? I wouldn't. I asked her if she would take another direction, if she would go around in the open air. No. She would walk right through the plague. What? She doesn't, maybe thinking about the plague is horrible. It's still around. The plague still exists. Not maybe the way we saw it, but there's still cases of the plague. It's horrible. So you couldn't give me enough money to walk through an area where that was going on, and with a mask, without a mask. Nope. So what does that say? What it says to me is that I actually somewhat believe I can get stuff from other people. So then anyone who's knows me or then they'll say the next thing, well, do I think anything else? Yeah, I do. I wonder why I didn't get stuff back in the 80s very much. I know I was a sickly kid, but I wonder why I didn't get sick back in the 80s. And I don't remember my family being sick all the time. It seems like everyone's sick all the time. Everyone's got sciatica. By the way, it's not normal to have sciatica. That's not a normal condition. It's not like, oh, well, I'm 30 now. I got sciatica. I had fibromyalgia when I was 30. When I was 18 or 19, I was told that I had a lower disc vertebral injury. The doctor told me, basically, you have sciatica. Then he put me through torturous physical therapy. I'm sorry to get off onto this. And I was like, can you do surgery? And he was like, no, because it could really damage your back. I didn't want to have sciatica. I saw that as being something unusual. This has become accepted. Once you get to be about 25, 30, you're pretty much going to start getting sciatica. You're not Iceman. If you don't know, Iceman had arthritic conditions. He had Lyme. The timer's going off. It's not good. No, this isn't good. Okay, now I'm going to get back to what I was saying. So I came across this woman and she's talking about certain things and she mentioned a couple of things. When I say stuff, if it is not supported, please let me know, because I'm not going to go. I've researched a little bit. I'm not going to research nonstop. I'm not a scientist, but I do research a lot. So here's a quote from Louis Pasteur. I've heard about a lot of quotes from Louis Pasteur, so I'm not trusting it anymore. I write a lot and I don't trust people who misquote. Here's what I'm seeing as a quote. The source is AZ quotes. It's not the germs we need to worry about. It's our inner terrain. That's Pasteur himself, if it's true. Flip a coin. So he made that comment. He had apparently a rival. I really don't want to say his name. Antoine Duchamp. I think it's French, so I'm not going to do a good job. If you want to look it up, Bechamp. I'm not a linguist. But he believed he was kind of warring with Louis Pasteur, who actually, whether he said this or not, he spent his life work on this. And this is what people are saying nonstop. And I start to doubt it when I see this. And Sarah could probably look it up for me a little bit, but I've done it already. Is Louis Pasteur is reported. This word reported is very important in the sentence. Is reported to have recanted his work on his deathbed, stating it is not the germs we need to worry about. It is our inner terrain. This has been a quote that I have doubted since it was told to me, and I'm not going to say who told it to me. I'm going to protect their anonymity because I don't like the kind of hatred that's going around. So purportedly, unfortunately, I don't know. I'll look a little bit more, but I'm not sure. So this other person, though, that I never heard, this is what's shocking to me, is I never heard about this person in biology. Never. Sarah, did you hear about him?
I don't.
Have you heard about Pasteur?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason I asked her is she's been in school more recently than I have in terms of this stuff. I don't remember it coming up. So terrain theory centers around the body. It's basically about keeping the body in balance, maintaining a state of wellness. Actually, I would call that something that I'm sure I might mispronounce. Sarah, can you look it up? Homeostasis. I think that's how it's pronounced.
I believe so.
Keeping the body in balance. The body tends to maintain a homeostasis, or at least it maintains this internal balance, regardless of the external circumstances. This is why our bodies keep temperature. We have cycles. And we'll keep going. So his thing that he was saying was, you keep disease at bay, keep the body well. If the terrain is compromised, it's opportunistic, and then it's disease-causing pathogens at that point, or it gives them an in, right? So it's an allowance of a pathogen to proliferate rather than the pathogen itself, according to this idea. I'm sorry if that was too succinct. So, I'm going to read a little bit of this. I'm not usually a big reader it bores me. This internal balance also includes the microbiomes in the gut and on the skin. Our bodies contain billions of bacteria, many of which can cause inflammation and disease if they multiply beyond the body's capability to keep them in check. Chronic stress caused by anxiety and depression have been shown to negatively impact the gut biome, which in turn dysregulates immune response. On the other hand, good nutrition and well-being can positively influence gut bacteria and improve immunity. Similarly, an imbalance of the skin microbiome can be caused by the overuse of chemical cleaners and antibacterial agents, leading to acne, dermatitis, lesions, and infection. Toxic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and even preservatives can disrupt natural bacteria, especially when ingested. So, then they talk a little bit more about chronic stress, how it affects the arteries, and it's just not good, okay? It causes problems. It even looks like it can cause cholesterol buildup, according to what they're saying, So the reason I'm revisiting this is because I can't help but wonder. It says our chronic stress has been shown to reduce the number of T cells that fight off infection. Make no mistake, stress can kill. So I was thinking about this whole thing, and I have stated this a number of times. Not just about stress. That's not any kind of revelation. But I have stated many times, and it took me a long time to accept that we had some control. The diet maybe could affect things. The consumption of sugar and salt and excessive foods, it could be a problem. The stress could be a problem. Somehow I was fighting it. I don't know why. But the thing is about it is recently I've noticed that the more stress that I'm under, the worse all my symptoms get. When my body calms down, my symptoms calm down. Even if at my worst state, if I can calm down, my symptoms calm down. You're probably going, what does that have to do with viruses? It does have something to do with them. How do I say this? If terrain does matter, and let's just go out on a limb here for a second and say terrain matters at least by some percentage. Let's just say it matters by 20%. Let's not even go all the way. One of the things that I think can affect the terrain the most of everything is stress. So you undergo stress, you're not feeling so good. And then what comes in? Does it really come in? Does it really come in? I'm not saying no one had a cold or whatever around you, but does it really come in, or does it come in because your body is taxed in some way? Because I got to tell you, every time in my life that I got very, very, very ill, I also can't help but notice that there was usually a lot of stress going on at the same time. So I actually believe that we need to give some weight to the idea that it is possible that terrain matters a lot more than we're saying because of stress alone. And then on top of it, what are we doing with the antibiotics and the antibacterial stuff and just scrubbing our hands too? There's bacteria in your hands it's good bacteria too. So if you constantly wash your hands, I knew someone who washed their hands so much that they had no fingerprints, hardly at all. And it sounds terrible, but so okay, everything's okay. I'm just saying that the police told her, you need to moisturize, man. We can't get fingerprints on you. That's not your biggest issue there. I'm not saying it is. But my point is, what is my point? That this was somebody really into health, and she viewed terrain of the environment, not of her hands. She viewed everything as the enemy. And to be fair to her, sorry to get off on my former friend, but to be fair to her, a doctor in this area told her not to go to church, not to leave the house. He told her immune system was so undone that it couldn't clear anything that it came in contact with, bacteria or viruses. I was so shocked. I had been going to go to the same doctor, not going to use his name. I told her, I don't agree. I don't agree. You obviously have some sort of immune system. You go out right now. What are you supposed to do? Just stop living? This was back in like 2015. So I don't agree with that type of thing. Have I felt that way? Like never going outside? Yes. It's partially what makes me not agree. I think the toxicity that has been produced by me staying inside and not talking to people, not seeing people, being in what's kind of quasi prison-like conditions in society has really screwed up terrain. I think worry screws up terrain. And unfortunately, it's human nature to worry, but not all of us worry the same. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe people who don't worry as much naturally don't have as much opportunistic moments for these things to come in. I'm trying to look at the things that are the most simple to address. They're not simple. I say it and I put in quotes because it's not simple to address stuff when you're enduring severe stress in your life. Now, I have to say, I agree with most of the people who concluded what I have. I don't think that there's nothing to say about germ theory. I don't think that germ theory is just BS. But I also think that our immune system has to be balanced. It has to not be around a lot of toxicity. So when I say toxicity, I'm talking about things like, things that like bad diet, like a lot of stress, a lot of worry. What other things? Just not having enough water. Maybe having the body's not pH be wrong in different areas, like in the urinary tract and the digestive tract, wherever. Like I think it's I remember telling people in the community, like what else are you doing besides just a mono type approach of, I don't mean mono like the illness, I mean mono like a single approach of just doing one thing, like an injection, or in this case, I can't remember if that injection was there at that time. I think it was just masking. And well, it might have been, people were planning to. And it's just, did you remember, Sarah? Man, the kind of response I got was like, diet doesn't affect human health. And I might have said this before. You might be hearing this twice. Sugar doesn't affect viruses. Smoking does it. Drinking does. Viruses cause human health illness. It's true that probably there's an involvement in some sort of codified information going into the body. Probably. Seems logical to me. But it's a conversation that's frustrating to me. Do people really think that eating gobs of sugar, eating excessive amounts of any one food, particularly one that's too tasty, do they really think that these things play no role in smoking? Actually, believe it or not, I had to take it back because it looks like nicotine itself might have helped a little bit in virus stuff. I'm hesitant to say much. But I am surprised at the level of unwillingness we have to come in and think that perhaps some of our own choices are definitely affecting us on a large scale. I guess it's at this time that I'm more willing to look at things to improve the terrain of the body. I mean, these things, like this person says, it's at templeofthesoul.org. I don't know who that is. I've just picked it at random. Okay? So it says here, good nutrition, exercise, social interaction, sunlight, fresh air, time in nature, meditation, breath work, fasting, and even cold exposure will all improve your health and well-being and your resistance to disease of all kinds. Now, I'm going to back up a bit. That statement is a little bit risky. But good nutrition, I think we can all agree, if you get somebody to work with you, if you figure out what is good for you, I think we can agree some things probably aren't very good, like eating a ton of sugar the way that Americans do isn't probably good. But, eating proper portions, eating a lot of vegetables, eating stuff that's good for you, maybe small portions of protein, no matter if it's meat or not. You're not supposed to be eating tons of it. Exercise, mobility is probably going to be good for you. Social interaction, probably going to be good for you. Sunlight's probably going to be good for you. Fresh air, definitely going to be good for you. Time in nature. Yeah, I think to a degree, even if it's just outside near trees. And meditation, all that stuff, these things, until I got to meditation, it can be really tough for some people to meditate. I'm not saying like it's harmful. Not necessarily, but fasting is really tough, and you do actually have to do it right. And then cold exposure, I agree, although I will say this. I think that if you have blood pressure issues, you should be careful about getting into like really, really icy cold water, and stuff like that. Like, I'm not sure that's the best idea. I'm not telling anyone to do this. I do cool showers at times, like just cool on the cool end. So I'm kind of am and kind of am not, because this is me kind of just telling my opinion. And one of the reasons I like to talk without interruption is because I found people just don't want to talk. They don't want to engage. And I know you might be saying, well, you just said you don't want to talk. No, I actually do. I'll listen to somebody talk and talk and talk. But then when I want to say my stuff, a lot of times they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear my ideas on things. I don't know what to say about that. I'm going to read this last part here and then I'm going to stop. Definitely, can share your ideas. Please try not to be divisive in commenting. I don't like it. I don't like what we're doing in society. It's not helping anyone. Look, terrain matters, and if you're somebody who's sick all the time, viruses are going to matter to you when you go in the public. Even if you don't believe in them. Right? Pathogens. You're going to believe in something. So, and plus, if you get sick, you're not going to care what's causing it. You're going to start associating it. Our species has coexisted with external pathogens for at least thousands of years, and I would argue a lot longer than that. But it is at least thousands. I like their position. And the body has an innate intelligence that is working constantly to keep us alive. We need to take responsibility for our own health, as this is our first line of defense. Now, I agree with them and I also don't. Sometimes we get ill and it is really hard to do the right thing. I'm going to give an example that's kind of on me. So I got really, really sick and it was induced by human beings. That's what I believe. So I believe that it was human interaction that actually made the circumstances ripe in the terrain for me to get ill and for my daughter to get ill. Stress. Very high stress and toxicity. So I have a point that I'm going to make and I hope I'm not going to lose it. I hate it when this happens to me. I just want to pause for a second. I got it. It's about chocolate. I want to say that in case. So I am sorry. When I have brain delay like that, I have to stop or else it'll just be a lot of me thinking and that's boring. I don't want to put anyone through that. But, so I was trying my hardest to eat well and everything. And looked like Coxsackie and Epstein-Barr and, things started to come out in our body. I don't even know if they came from outside. I think they were already there in the terrain. And they got out of control, these things that maybe wouldn't have done any damage. They hadn't been doing damage in me in quite a while. So it got out of control, right? Anyway, I quit eating. Like my stomach was like practically, it felt like it was caved in on itself, eating itself almost. It was terrible. Sarah had the same symptom, just not as bad, but she did have it.
I did definitely have it.
And so at some point, I grabbed chocolate. I think the timer might be going off. If not, then I'm hearing things. I grabbed chocolate, and it was like a chocolate mint. I didn't want to, but I think we had to get it. My daughter said, I said maybe a mint. I couldn't think of one thing that sounded good to me to eat. Not one. It was scaring me. And I thought maybe I could eat some sort of mint. So we got this healthier mint, and I had to eat it. I felt really bad about it. To have to do that after all the talking I had done about sugar. But I never eat sugar. No, I don't like eating sugar, and I don't like eating junk. It led me back into almost having to eat sugar. It was weird. It almost makes me feel a little bit better. It could be, though, because my eating is so low that, at some point I got to believe that, glucose probably doesn't do as much harm. But it doesn't seem like during being really sick is the time to have tons of mint and chocolate. So I'm using myself as an example. I felt pushed to have to do that, though. I felt pushed. In fact, with my daughter, I was telling her about it. She said, well, you may have to have it here and there. So I'm certainly no perfect person, but I will tell you something. It is difficult to get me to eat bad stuff. I know and here's another example of it, though. That's just to turn myself in, kind of. I had to eat out at restaurants. That's something I don't do. Sure, I'm probably picking better restaurants, but I still had to eat out at restaurants. It's not cheap either. It's getting ridiculous. Anyway, inside the house, though, when we cook, we don't use excessive amount of salt. We certainly don't use excessive amounts of sugar in here at all, if any. When we do, we try to use coconut sugar dates. So I think there's something to be said for terrain. I don't know about boosting your immune system. It seems like everybody wants to boost their immune system and get something that will really get in there and kill these things. Here's the thing. I'm not so sure that our kill mentality is working. It's a bit over the top. We're killing too much. And that environment, right? Like if you take, what's that called? Germex? Germex has this stuff in it. I can't remember the name of it now. But it's this, oh God, I wish I could remember. I should have my daughter look it up. But not Germex, but it might be Germex. There is this particular thing that they use as an antibacterial in hospitals and everything. And what it's done is created superbugs. So think of it this way. Why would it not be true of us too? If we're taking in antibiotics and this and that to destroy everything, why would it not be true that it would screw up the biome? What is the name of that stuff?
Sense.
I have to know. Hold on a second.
Stuff?
It's not Germex. It's got this. There is this bad thing in it. It's an unnatural antibacterial, and this thing was used in all these hospitals. And I'm trying to find it, but
for some reason it's not coming.
Yeah, well, it used to be used a lot. Now we don't use it
What
anymore.
you're talking
Yeah,
about,
she
but
knows
I
what it
just-
is. Anyway, this was used in hospitals. Oh, I can't believe it. I have it. Triclosan, maybe?
Maybe.
Triclosan? That could be it. And I'm going to have to stop just because I'm getting tired. But yeah, it's an antibacterial and antifungal agent. And it's just like, it was put in all sorts of stuff. Here's saying toothpaste, soaps. What else? The hands, you're just killing bacteria and stuff nonstop, right? That's life on your hands. Skin is affected from it. I've seen it. Saw some person she had cuts all over her hands from just excessive use of sanitizing fluid. And honestly, a lot of what's being used without this triclosan, just rubbing together for a couple seconds, all you did was get this on your hands. I'm not sure it did much. And then it produces cuts on the hand. And what's his cuts? Are cuts good? Even if you don't believe in viruses, a cut seems like a place where it could allow for opportunistic entry into the body of something. And if you weren't doing your best, you may not be able to fight it. You can't help but say you couldn't fight it, right? Doesn't that kind of just beg the question of that you maybe could have fought it if circumstances were better? I guess it's something I'm thinking about because I'm constantly scared to death every time I'm in a public place. I'm getting a little tired of it. I don't even think that's good for you. So today I wasn't really in the store with that many people, and I just kind of let myself not really use a mask that much. I found myself using masks at unusual times. It doesn't do any good to pull a mask over your face if you've been in a room for 2 hours with somebody, just because, I don't know, they talk a little louder. Honestly, and I know I say these things at the risk of being assassinated still. I mean, verbally. But I honestly wonder, when you're wearing a mask, I wonder a little bit if when you're taking it on and off, it might actually make you more prone. Because you're taking it off. I'm not talking about if you're touching the mask. Obviously, duh. But if you take it off, I'm wondering if when you do, because air flows, let's say this germ theory is really where it's all at 100%. So you take your mask off, air flows on it, and if there was anything in there, now it's caught in your mask on the inside, and then you put it back on. Now you've trapped the germs in there. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not talking about from your mouth. I'm talking about coming from the outside. So I'm starting to question some of our logic in this, although I always did. And I don't have better answers for people either. Okay, I wore a mask and still continue to wear a mask in a lot of arenas. But I've also sort of started to not. It's been a long time that I don't really think it's doing much for me. Well, I'll tell you what makes me say that. I listened and I stayed inside for the most part. I don't know why I'm saying for the most part. I stayed inside. And I went out and went for walks outside. And I went into stores once in a while and I followed all these rules and stuff. And I was sick by the summer of 2020 and at the latest by the fall of 2020. Ironically, every year since then, I'm getting sick in the summer and then the fall. I just noticed it. So the first year I was sick in the summer a little bit, then I was sick in October, and then the following year I was sick again in October, and a little bit in the summer too of 2021. And then 2022, same sort of pattern. It's just been really hard. But I'm telling you, like, at what point do I get to see people? At what point do I get to talk to my family? At what point do I have to try to find ways to keep myself healthy? And I think that point is coming now. I was asked a question back in 2020. Actually, it might have been 2021. How long will I allow the threat of a potential virus to potentially cause problems that are worse emotionally and even physically? This is what's ironic. At the time this question was asked to me, I actually was ill with what everyone is calling COVID. When I was asked that, the person asked me, how long are you going to go on like this, Cheryl? Now you're not even in a store. No one even wants you to go out. Well, I guess that was the answer. I was going to do it for a very long time. So, I hope this has provided some food for thought. As you can tell, I'm not the type of person to take a hardline position. I have a more mid-grade position on this one. I tend to think that terrain's very, very important. Terrain of your body. If you're hearing train, I'm sorry. Terrain is very important. But, at the same time, there's something probably to be said for something coming into your system. I mean, for instance, terrain's important, but if you get exposed to a bunch of mold, it's probably not going to be good for you after a point. You know what I mean? Like, and somebody could probably make an argument back on that. Well, if you were, detoxing well enough, you'd be able to detox the mold. Maybe so. So you're never going to get me to take a hardline position on this. Maybe you will if you talk down to me or something, but I doubt it. I've had plenty of people talk down to me. And let me tell you something, it's made my positions more ambiguous. When somebody talks down to me, all I think is somebody's trying to get me to believe what they believe. They don't want to hear what I have to say. Then I fight against that. Anytime someone tells me not to say something, to keep it a secret, I fight against it. And if I were you, I would as well. We need to have independent thought, or at least thought amongst each other too. It's not even independent thought, it's still group dynamics. We need to be able to talk. And all this getting angry and getting annoyed and saying, oh, it's nothing, X virus, or oh, it's everything, I don't think it's getting us anywhere. And as one doctor pointed out, what type of doctor he was or not tonight, there are germs everywhere if you go with germ theory. So perhaps looking at terrain will at least empower you to make your body in the best shape, the thing you have control over to some degree, to fight these external pathogens or the external environment that is toxic. He acknowledged it was. And he invited people to try to be well when they're in these environments on a daily basis, because I think people are tired of getting sick. I have rambled on. It is about 45 minutes. I'm sorry that this is so long. It's hard to talk about things like germ theory and terrain theory. They're very loaded topics. I'm always afraid when I talk about vaccines or germs or terrain, because people all have an opinion. And I would say something else, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stop right there. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope this makes you think. And if nothing else, try to limit your sugar and eat a better diet. If you want somebody to look at that I think has a pretty good diet. I actually don't have anyone in mind right now. I'm sorry. So, good night or good day, and I will do this next time. It's going to be a really long to upload.